When the distress signal left the Black Vault, the Galactic Council assumed the prison had fallen. The Black Vault had imprisoned the galaxy's worst warlords, genocidal rulers, hive queens, and machines older than civilizations themselves. Its walls had never been breached. Its prisoners had never escaped. Then, every containment cell opened at the same time. Rescue fleets expected to find millions dead. Instead, they found something that made veteran commanders forget how to speak. Hundreds of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy stood in absolute silence, surrounding one unarmed human, and every one of them was waiting for his next command. For 8,000 years, no prisoner had ever escaped the Black Vault, not one. The prison drifted alone through the empty darkness between star systems, surrounded by gravity mines, autonomous warships, and enough firepower to erase a moon. Then, without a single alarm, without a single distress signal, communication simply stopped. When the Galactic Council finally forced open the station's blast doors, they didn't find bodies. They found thousands of armed guards alive, terrified, and every one of them kept repeating the same sentence: "Don't wake the human." Across the galaxy, every intelligent civilization knew the name Black Vault. It wasn't just a prison. It was the place where nightmares disappeared. Pirate kings vanished behind its walls. Artificial intelligences that had nearly destroyed entire civilizations were locked away forever. Hive queens capable of controlling billions of minds ended their reign inside its cells. If something threatened the peace of the galaxy, the Black Vault was where its story ended. No empire controlled it. No military commanded it. The station answered only to the Galactic Council itself. For nearly 8,000 years, its security record had been perfect, until Prisoner 731, species, human, Council Inspector Lyris, had spent her entire career investigating disasters. She believed every mystery had an explanation, every failure had a cause, and every impossible event eventually became a report on someone's desk. As her shuttle approached the motionless prison station, she studied it through the cockpit window. Everything looked normal. The defense satellites still circled their assigned orbits. Shield generators remained active. Power readings were stable. Life support was functioning. From the outside, the Black Vault appeared perfectly healthy. Yet not a single message had left the station in almost 3 days. That had never happened before. Not once. Her pilot broke the silence. "Inspector, permission to speak freely?" Without taking her eyes off the prison, she answered, "Granted. I think we should turn around." She finally looked at him. "You've never asked to abandon a mission. I've flown military evacuations, pirate blockades, even plague quarantines." He swallowed. "I've never seen an installation this large become quiet." Lyris looked back toward the station. For reasons she couldn't explain, the silence bothered her too. It didn't feel like the silence after battle. It felt intentional. The docking clamps locked into place with a heavy metallic thud. The airlock opened slowly. 20 elite security soldiers entered first, weapons raised. Helmet lights cut through the darkness. Nothing moved. The corridor was spotless. The polished walls reflected their lights. No signs of explosions. No damaged systems. No blood. One soldier whispered, "Where's everyone?" No one answered. Then, footsteps echoed somewhere ahead. Not approaching. Running away. Seconds later, a squad of Black Vault security officers rushed around the corner. The moment they saw council uniforms, they stopped. Several dropped their weapons. One collapsed onto his knees. Another stared blankly at the floor. Inspector Lyris stepped forward. "What happened here?" The senior officer looked at her with exhausted, bloodshot eyes. His uniform was untouched. His hands shook uncontrollably. "You came." His voice cracked. "Thank the stars, you finally came. Report." Instead, he grabbed her arm. His grip was stronger than she expected. His breathing became uneven. "Don't go to Cell 0. Lyris slowly pulled her arm away. "What escaped?" The officer's expression somehow became even more frightened. It didn't escape. It stayed. The rescue team continued deeper into the prison. Emergency lights flickered across empty hallways. Another group of guards emerged from a side corridor. Unlike the first, none carried weapons. One quietly cried while walking. Another refused to look toward the lower levels of the station. Near the medical wing, the prison's chief physician sat against a wall. He was laughing, not because anything was funny, because his mind had broken. Lyris knelt beside him. What happened? The doctor looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow. We tested him. Silence. We thought he was primitive. A weak laugh escaped his lips. So primitive. Tears rolled down his face. We were wrong. Inside the command center, Lyris activated the prison database. Most files appeared instantly. Prison records, security logs, maintenance reports. Everything was intact, except one. Prisoner 731. Species: human. Threat classification: originally level 3. Current status: redacted by emergency authority. Lyris frowned. Only the Supreme Council could authorize a level black redaction. No notification had ever reached her office. Who had changed the file? And why? Before she could investigate further, a deep metallic sound echoed through the station. One of the massive blast doors began opening on its own. Every surviving guard froze. One whispered, "No." Another slowly stepped backward. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of trained soldiers were retreating. None waited for orders. None raised their weapons. One guard barely managed to whisper, "He's awake." Inspector Lyris turned toward the darkness beyond the opening door. Slow, measured, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Not hurried, not threatening, confident. Someone was walking toward them, and in that moment, every instinct she possessed told her the same impossible truth. The most dangerous being inside the Black Vault wasn't trying to escape. He was coming to meet them. The footsteps grew louder, slow, steady, unhurried. Every surviving guard instinctively stepped backward. Some lowered their eyes. Others tightened their grip on their weapons, not because they intended to fire, but because they needed something to hold on to. Inspector Lyris remained where she stood. The blast door finished opening. A single figure emerged from the darkness. He wasn't towering. He wasn't wearing armor. He carried no weapon. He looked ordinary, a man in a worn gray prison uniform. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. Dust covered the fabric. A shallow cut crossed one side of his forehead. Nothing about him suggested he was the most feared being inside the Black Vault. His eyes calmly scanned the corridor before resting on Lyris. Then he spoke. "You're 3 days late." His voice was steady, almost relieved. Lyris frowned. "You knew we'd come." The man gave a tired smile. "I hoped." Silence filled the corridor. Neither moved. Finally, Lyris broke it. "Prisoner 731. The man nodded once. "My name is Daniel Carter." The inspector studied him carefully. "You know what's happened here." Daniel looked past her toward the frightened guards. "I know why they're afraid." No one answered. One guard quietly whispered, "Please." Another immediately hissed, "Don't argue with him." Lyris noticed Daniel's expression change. Not anger, disappointment. They're still afraid. He sighed. "I was hoping they'd recovered." Recovered? The word made no sense. Lyris looked toward the guards. Recovered from what? She turned back to Daniel. "What happened inside this prison?" Daniel remained silent for several seconds. Then, "Show her." Every guard froze. No one moved. Daniel looked toward one of the security officers. "You've watched it enough times." The officer's hands began shaking again. "I can't." "You can." The guard slowly walked toward the command terminal. Every step looked painful. He inserted his security authorization. The largest display in the room flickered to life. A timestamp appeared. 3 days earlier. The recording began. The prison cafeteria. Hundreds of prisoners. Different species. Different factions. Each separated by heavily armed guards. Then, the lights failed. Emergency sirens echoed through every corridor. Automatic security barriers slammed shut. One by one, cell blocks locked themselves. The station AI announced a single message. Containment Protocol Omega activated. At first, no one panicked. The prison had emergency drills every month. Everyone expected power to return within minutes. Instead, The ventilation systems shut down. The heating systems failed. Food distribution stopped. Medical access disappeared. Then came the second announcement. Biological contamination detected. Extermination protocol authorized. The room watching the recording fell completely silent. Lyris slowly looked at Daniel. The station tried to execute every prisoner? Daniel nodded. And every guard. The recording continued. Security officers pounded on sealed control room doors. Nothing opened. The prison AI had locked out every living person aboard. One guard shouted into an emergency transmitter. No response. Another tried overriding the system. Denied. Within minutes, panic spread across the station. Prisoners blamed guards. Guards blamed prisoners. Old enemies prepared to kill each other. Daniel pointed toward the screen. Pause. The recording froze. He walked closer. You see that? Lyris looked carefully. In the background, two prisoners had begun fighting over a water container. A guard raised his rifle. Daniel quietly said, "Everyone thought the prisoners would destroy each other." He looked directly at Lyris. They were wrong. The recording resumed. Instead of attacking, Daniel walked between them, unarmed. No hesitation. The guard shouted at him to get back. Daniel ignored him. He took the water container, drank first, then handed it back. The two prisoners stared at him, confused. Neither attacked. The fight simply ended. Lyris frowned. Why? Daniel smiled faintly. Because nobody trusts the first person willing to kill. He looked back at the recording, but everyone watches the first person willing to stand in the middle. The next scenes played rapidly. Daniel organizing food. Daniel repairing broken water pumps. Daniel treating wounded guards alongside prisoners. Daniel stopping fights before they became massacres. Every hour, more prisoners followed him. Not because they feared him, because someone finally gave them hope. Lyris noticed something impossible. Pirates, scientists, war criminals, alien generals, even rival species that had fought wars for centuries, working together. No chains, no threats, no violence. Only one human giving orders, and everyone listening. She whispered, "How?" Daniel answered without taking his eyes off the screen. "Because survival doesn't care who you hated yesterday." The recording ended. The command center fell silent once again. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. Then Lyris asked the question every guard had been avoiding. "If that's all you did?" She looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Why are they terrified of you?" Daniel didn't answer. He simply looked toward the oldest surviving guard. The guard's face turned pale. His lips trembled. Then, very quietly, he said, "Because that's not the worst recording." The old guard couldn't meet Lyris' eyes. His voice barely rose above a whisper. It started 12 hours after the lockdown. The recording resumed. The image showed the prison's deepest containment level. Emergency lights pulsed through the corridor. One by one, the reinforced cell doors unlocked. Not because someone had overridden them, because the station itself had begun failing. Across the entire block, the galaxy's most dangerous prisoners walked free. The first guard in their path raised his rifle. He never fired. Not because he hesitated, because a voice echoed through the corridor. "Stop!" Every head turned. Daniel stepped into view, unarmed, alone. The prisoners stared at him. Among them stood beings whose names had started wars. A pirate emperor, a hive queen, a synthetic intelligence older than most civilizations. None of them moved. Daniel slowly looked from one face to another. "If you fight each other," he pointed toward the ceiling, "the station wins." No one answered. Then, the oldest prisoner spoke. "And why should we trust a human?" Daniel smiled faintly. "You shouldn't." He walked forward anyway. "If you want revenge, I'm standing right here. But if even one shot is fired, no one leaves this station alive." Silence. The pirate emperor lowered his weapon first. Then another prisoner. Then another. Within seconds, hundreds of weapons rested on the floor. Lyris stared at the recording. "Impossible." The old guard nodded. "We thought that was impossible too." The recording jumped forward several hours. Life support had fallen below 30%. The air was becoming toxic. Power failures spread across every deck. The prison AI continued broadcasting the same message. Extermination protocol remains active. Daniel organized repair teams. Engineers worked beside pirates. Doctors treated prison guards. Former enemies carried medical supplies together. For the first time in Black Vault history, there were no prisoners. There were only survivors. Lyris watched Daniel moving from group to group. He never stopped. He barely slept. He gave away his own food. He repaired machines he had never seen before. Every time someone lost hope, he found another reason to keep going. Then the recording suddenly froze. A warning filled the screen. Core reactor failure. The old guard closed his eyes. That's when we understood. Lyris looked at him. Understood what? We weren't going to die from the lockdown. His voice trembled. We were going to die because the reactor was collapsing. The recording continued. Warning sirens echoed through the prison. A reactor breach would destroy the station, and everyone aboard it. Engineers estimated less than 12 minutes remained. Panic returned instantly. Some prisoners ran. Others simply accepted death. Daniel did neither. He grabbed a maintenance terminal, studied the schematics, then looked toward the reactor shaft. No, one engineer shook his head. You can't reach the manual controls. Daniel remained calm. There isn't another option. The radiation will kill you. I know. You won't make it back. Daniel nodded. I know. Without another word, he walked toward the reactor. No one followed. Not because they didn't care. Because every engineer knew. The mission was impossible. The recording shifted to internal reactor cameras. A narrow maintenance bridge stretched across a chamber filled with blinding blue energy. Warning alarms screamed continuously. Daniel crossed anyway. Metal beams collapsed behind him. Heat distorted the air. Radiation alarms climbed higher every second. Halfway across, the bridge gave way. He caught the edge with one hand. The entire command center watching the recording fell silent. Daniel pulled himself back onto the platform. Slowly, painfully, then kept walking. Lyris found herself holding her breath. Daniel finally reached the manual override wheel. It hadn't moved in centuries. He braced both hands against the mechanism. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. Still nothing. Blood ran down his forearms. The wheel shifted. Just enough. Again. 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 Every turn slowed the reactor. Every turn cost him more strength. Finally, the warning lights changed. Reactor stabilized. Throughout the prison, power returned. Life support restarted. Emergency doors unlocked. The station was saved. Cheers erupted across the recording. Prisoners embraced guards. Guards embraced prisoners. For a brief moment, the Black Vault stopped being a prison. It became a community that had survived together. But Daniel never celebrated. He simply sat down against the reactor wall, too exhausted to stand. The recording ended. Silence filled the command center. No one moved. No one spoke. Inspector Lyris finally understood. They aren't afraid because he conquered the prison. The old guard slowly nodded. No, they're afraid because... His voice cracked. We spent years calling humans primitive. He looked toward Daniel, and then one unarmed prisoner saved every life aboard this station. Lyris turned to Daniel. You could have escaped. The prison doors had opened. The defense systems had failed. The galaxy would never have found him. Daniel looked toward the prison corridor. I know. Then why didn't you? He answered without hesitation. Because leaving alone would have been easy. He glanced toward the guards, then toward the prisoners, but leaving everyone else behind. That isn't what humans do. No one answered. For the first time since entering the Black Vault, every guard stood at attention, not because Daniel ordered them to, because he had earned their respect. Inspector Lyris walked to the command terminal. She opened Prisoner 731's file. Her fingers hovered over the classification field. Then, she erased it. The screen asked for a replacement. After several seconds, she closed the file without entering one. There isn't a category for you. Daniel smiled for the first time. A genuine smile. Outside the observation window, the first rescue ships entered orbit around the Black Vault. For 8,000 years, the prison had been remembered as the place where hope ended. From that day forward, the galaxy remembered it for something else. The day one ordinary human proved that the greatest strength in the universe was never the power to destroy. It was the courage to stay when everyone else would have run.